Today you're meeting to discuss the infrastructure needs, the infrastructure investment needs to help prevent climate change. What is the role of your group, first of all, Globe EU?
Globe EU is a network of parliamentarians, like Globe International globally, that is interested about system change and paradigm change. Quite often we are trying to make this kind of a silo solutions, a bit here and a bit there, but like in these infrastructure investments, if you just make a coal power plant slightly more efficient, you are not going to solve the climate crisis. You have to create the infrastructure of smart grids, super grids, how you can provide the renewables, how are you going to actually finance it, and how you make green development projects in different parts of the cities and so on. So it is total set of actions that is needed.
The Paris Climate Change Agreement estimates that we require 200 billion per year between 2020 and 2030 alone. Are we taking the right steps, and what would you like to see being done in order to reach that very, very high level of investment?
Firstly, we are taking baby steps, and quite often we are saying that because the amount is so surmountable, so big, we can't do any more. But actually, this is a loan, this is a debt that we have left ahead of us, and the longer we wait, the higher the cost is going to be. And then you should actually compare the costs of climate change, and this is going to be I don't know how many tenfolds or hundredfolds of this cost. So this is investment purely on the future. So we do have the money, we have to prioritize our investments, public and private investments, and we have to give the security and long-term guidelines for private investors to make those investments.
One of the speakers mentioned the role that public investment plays in this. European governments often are very, very hard-pressed to stay within their budget limits. What other mechanisms might be available to them to get this investment going?
Of course, there are this kind of mechanisms like green bonds, where you create this kind of a green development initiative and you launch the bonds, or you can make deals with investors, constructors about this kind of a long-term commitment where they actually do partially get their benefits out of it. But then the most important is to comb through the budgets. Globally, we are using 6.5% of the GDP on direct and indirect subsidies on fossil fuels. So if we just would look these subsidies on EU level, member state level, and skim them off, you actually would have the money for these investments, and probably something would be even left out to do something with your debts. So it is more a question where you use the money than the sort of a sheer question of existence of money.
Malinimera Globe International. You've been with the organisation for 25 years. Have you made significant progress in that time?
It's very clear that Globe International, which is the largest network of environmentally minded legislators, has made a huge difference. So when we started more than 25 years ago, there was very little legislation on issues around climate and energy. There were, in 1997, at the Kyoto Climate Conference, something like 54 pieces of legislation and policy on climate and energy issues. But at our last count, just a year ago, we recognized that there were more than 800 pieces of climate policy legislation made by lawmakers in national parliaments across the world. So we've had a game-changing impact.
What needs to be done now? What are the main blocks to further progress?
Well, clearly we need implementation of existing policies, measures, laws and regulation. But 2015 was a spectacular year in terms of revised political commitment to managing our climate risks. So we need to make sure, as we were discussing today, that investment in climate finance goes in the right direction, so supporting renewable energy, energy efficiency, and moving away over time from fossil fuels. Parliamentarians and stakeholders have a key role in ensuring that.
You worked directly with politicians. How important are politicians to bringing in the investment? What do the politicians, what do they need to signal to the market in order to bring in the massive amount of investment that is needed over the next 10, 15 years?
Well, you're right. There's a massive amount of investment that's needed, but we know that investors are actually ready if the public makes the right demands for investment in environmentally sustainable infrastructure, for example, climate resilient infrastructure, that the investors are willing to do so. What's the role of politicians? Well, they speak for the public. They are our elected representatives. We need to make sure that they understand the need for investment into renewables, into a safe, secure and affordable future for all of us. So they have to make the political case. There is a very strong economic case, and we need to make sure that we educate ourselves and our politicians to make that strong economic case for investment in a clean energy future for us all.
Where do we see leadership at an international level?
Well, for decades, really. I mean, the EU made the field. The European countries were really the primary advocates. They walked the talk in terms of climate actions and climate policies. And I would single out the UK as one of the key countries which led on that internationally. And the UK, for example, was the country which had the first climate change law ever. It really blazed a trail. Now, however, things could be seen to be going slightly into reverse. So there's been quite wobbly period in the last few months in terms of the UK's commitment to green investment, so the privatisation of the Green Investment Bank, the seeming lack of political commitment to green finance and investment into long-term energy infrastructure, green energy infrastructure. So there is a real concern that, well, the UK seems to be content to be out of the vanguard, out of the leadership group, and that's causing us some concern, but we'll wait to see.